I'm your host, Jay, and welcome to another episode of the Hype Club podcast. Hello, everyone. New week, new grind. How's everyone doing? I'm doing well, and I hope all of you are doing good. On today's episode, we're back with another special interview. But first, if you would like one of your talents, artists, celebrities on the Hype Club podcast, or you would want to send press release or have us feature you, your brand, your product on the hypeclubpodcast.com, please send us your email at thehypeclubpodpr@gmail.com and we'll get back to you in a timely manner. To keep up with the Hype Club podcast, make sure to follow us on all our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook at the Hype Club Podcast and Twitter at the Hype Club Pod, or simply go to thehypeclubpodcast.com. Subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts. Now get yourself some OJ, sit back, and keep on listening because you won't want to miss this interview. Let's go! On today's show, our special guest is an actor, producer, and co-director of the upcoming documentary, The Orange Years, the Nickelodeon Story, which will be available on demand November 17, Mr. Scott Barber. Welcome to the show, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. Thank you for joining us on the Hype Club podcast. Let's start by telling our audience who is Scott Barber. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, where you come from.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm just a guy that's dabbled in in filmmaking for a while. Like you said, I'd done some acting. I'd also done some voiceover work. I think I maybe have more of a face for radio. So this is great here. And Adam and I, my co-director for the Orange Years, we had written some scripts in the past, and this is my first foray into documentary filmmaking. I'd certainly made some documentary shorts before, but this is my first and Adam's first feature-length film. So that's a quick abridged version of my background.
Great. Before we talk about the documentary, I wanted to ask you, with everything that's going on in the world with the pandemic and all, how COVID conscious have you been?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And luckily, this documentary we actually finished a couple of years ago. So we were finished filming and everything before COVID even happened.
Okay, I think it started with the crowdfunding and Indiegogo went back in 2016, 2017.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We did an Indiegogo at the very end of 2016, and then that wrapped up at the end. So then at the very beginning of 2017, we were able to just start and get going on it. And we took a big trip early that year, 2017, to Los Angeles and started interviewing a lot of people. Shortly after that, we took a trip to New York. And then just a couple more trips. And yeah, so 2017 was when we filmed it. And then 2018 is when we edited it. And at the end of 2018, we debuted at Doc NYC. And it was just a great experience.
Awesome. The Orange Years, the Nickelodeon Story, is about the formative years of the network and a key player of its success, Geraldine Laybourne. How this project came about?
Yeah, so Adam, my co-director, and I, we were huge fans of Nickelodeon when we were kids. It was a huge part of both of our childhood. And we've also been friends since the early 90s, whenever we were literally watching all of the shows that are featured in our documentary together as little kids. So that was a really great experience to get to make a film with somebody that you've been friends with since you were a little kid. And it was also, Adam and I are both come from broken families. And when Adam's family divorced, they moved away. And this is before social media. So, you know, a lot of times when your friend moved away back then in the 90s, your friendship just kind of unfortunately
ended.
It ended. Yeah. And, but luckily because we would call each other on the phone and we would watch this program called SNICK, Saturday Night Nick. I don't know if you watched that. Or how familiar. Yeah, it's every kids all across the nation were getting in front of this. We're sitting on a big orange couch and watching these kind of scary and more shows that were geared more towards that older kid demographic, 11, 12, 13. And so we would watch those and we would talk about those. We would talk about Are You Afraid of the Dark on the phone. So Nickelodeon was an important part of our life. And so when Adam and I decided to we wanted to make a film and produce a film. We didn't want to just write a script. We wanted to make it ourselves so we could make sure that, we could get our hands in all different aspects of filmmaking and make sure the film got completed. A lot of times you sell a script and it's great and then it never gets made or it gets changed a bunch. We wanted to say, let's just make something. And so when we decided to make a documentary, we said we remembered those kind of childhood memories, and we kind of noticed how everybody kind of had those same childhood memories. Like everybody was really, really, really passionate about 80s and 90s Nickelodeon. And so we said, well, let's do a Nickelodeon documentary. And then, we were like, yeah, that's great. There would definitely be people that would be into it. But is there a story there? If you just show a bunch of shows, like, how is it all connected? Like, what's the story with rising and falling action and stuff like that? And then it was once we started doing some research and we found out about, like you mentioned, Geraldine Laybourne, and she was the president all throughout the 80s and 90s. So all of those wonderful shows, starting back as far as You Can't Do That on Television from the 80s to all that, in the late 90s and going into the new millennium, she was responsible for all of that. So, and we saw that she had to, go through a lot of hardships and do a lot of things that a lot of people said this will never work.
She was the trailblazer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And once we found out about that, we're like, wow, we were like, I don't think a lot of people know about this. Like, a lot of people, if you go, oh, remember All That, or remember Kenan and Kel, remember Are You Afraid of the Dark? People are like, oh my God, yes, I do. And I love that show. But they didn't necessarily know about all the behind the scenes people. And so we kind of wanted to give someone a little bit of both. In this documentary, you get to see all your favorite Nick stars. You get to see Kenan Thompson, Kel Mitchell, Melissa Joan Hart, Larissa Olenek, Mark Summers, Kirk Fogg from Legends of the Hidden Temple. You get to see all those people, but then you also get to find out about how all those shows came about, which I think people will find pretty fascinating. I know I did.
Yes. The network was initially launched in 1977 and was named Cube and Pinwheel, and then rebranded to Nickelodeon in 1979, which I had no clue and learned from watching your documentary. Before working on this project, did you know the history of Nick?
So no, and thank you so much for bringing this up. Your questions are amazing.
Thank you.
I did not know about Cube. So the earliest I remember, kind of the front end of this documentary and the back end of this documentary, I didn't know about. Me or Adam really didn't know about either of them. We were 80s and 90s kids, so like late 90s, we were kind of too old, and then late, like you said, late 70s, early 80s, I just didn't know about it. My family didn't even get cable till more like the mid to late 80s. So that was actually fun. So much of this documentary we had, we were passionate about. When you're passionate about something, it's so it's fun to get to make a documentary about something that means a lot and is very personal. But it's also kind of fun because you get to be more like a real journalist, because you're an outsider looking in, making, when we made those parts about something that I had no nostalgia button for. I had no preconceived notions. I didn't even know it was a thing. And I was absolutely fascinated by Cube. It's this, I think people hopefully get a kick out of it. It's this weird, bizarre, like late 70s, early 80s technology that people thought was going to change television, and it didn't. It was kind of like Laserdisc. Do you remember Laserdisc or like Betamax? It kind of went like that, or Blockbuster Video.
Yes.
It kind of went that way of just going extinct, but really fast. But then, there was this one channel on it called Pinwheel that people were like, okay, Cube is going away, but this kids network is pretty cool. So I loved learning about that. And I had no idea about the early years of Nickelodeon. Probably like 1979 to like 1985. I had no idea about it before I made this.
I was born in 1979, so it's, my...
Okay. Thank you for telling me. I was too. So we probably have a lot of the same, like when we're thinking back to these things, we'll probably
Yes.
have some similar like time frame references and stuff.
Yes. The documentary goes behind the scenes of some of the most popular shows of the, like we said, 80s, 90s, that was centered around and made for everyday kids. It chronicles the rise of the network's success and was the first interactive TV programming of its kind. Can you tell us more about the Orange Years?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really what this documentary is about. It's definitely, you know, the easiest way to describe it is it's about the Nickelodeon network. But to really further define it, one, we're talking about the amazing work that Geraldine Laybourne and her team of just crazy, out of the box punk rock team did to make this network what it was. And we're trying to we chronicle from the very beginning until it became a juggernaut. Like, we're kind of looking at it as like, we know what Nickelodeon is now. It's a juggernaut. It's on board. It's the same as PBS or Disney in terms of how many kids know about it. Like, SpongeBob is just as famous as Mickey Mouse at this point with young kids. And we're just looking at how did they get to that point? How did they get to the point where they were equal with Disney and PBS? So we're really not set, there's a lot of shows that came later that I think are just as good as the shows that are featured in the documentary. But our cutoff was just once it became huge. Now we're kind of already living in that era where it's huge. So we
Yes.
stopped there. So that's really, if you want to find out how Nickelodeon became this thing, and there's a lot of things you didn't know about, really, because they were also not just shaping their network, they were shaping media at large. Like, now knowing we were born in the same year, I know you remember when cartoons were only Saturday morning.
Yes, it definitely. I
Um,
used to wake up every Saturday morning, like early, 7 o'clock, 8, I think they started, and just sat there and watch.
Yes, yes. And then, now we have things like the Cartoon Network and
Yes.
channels that play cartoons and kids programming all day long.
Hmm.
And Nickelodeon is kind of responsible for that. We kind of talk about that. They were the first people to make original creator driven cartoons that weren't just part of before that you kind of had to have a toy and a movie and a part of a bigger franchise, like our books, like Where's Waldo, Ninja Turtles, My Little Pony. That's kind of what cartoons were all about before. And this idea of these quirky, weird, creator-driven cartoons that you see all over the place now really started with Nickelodeon.
Yes, like I said, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent in front of the television every Saturday as a kid, watching shows like Dog, The Rugrats, what else? Hey Arnold, and so many
Hmm.
more. Looking back, those were the good old days. What were your favorite TV shows that had a big impact in your childhood?
On Nickelodeon,
Yeah,
or just kind of in general.
both.
Uh that's tough. I mean, Nickelodeon, so much of it shaped my childhood, because I was a latchkey kid, so I did spend a lot of time in front of the TV, and thank goodness it was somebody was controlling that TV that was actually a good, you find out it's Geraldine Laybourne. If kids are gonna have to be latchkey kids in front of the TV, thank goodness it was somebody that was honest and didn't want to exploit kids and sell them a
Mhm.
bunch of garbage and make money off of them. Because that's really what was happening throughout the 80s. More and more kids were coming home alone. And while at the same time, cable was coming into their home. So it was kind of this relationship, this symbiotic relationship that cable filled a need that was unfortunately there. But, I really loved Are You Afraid of the Dark? I thought that show was so cool.
Yes, that was a good one.
Yeah, I always wanted to be a part of the Midnight Society. I mean, how cool would that be to go out in the woods? And I love how they don't really ever explain how those kids are able to do that. They just are there,
I know.
because some of them are pretty young. Like, they're like maybe 12, 13, and they're just out in the woods in the
I
middle of the
know.
night. Um, and it's funny, as a kid, you never questioned it. Like, I never thought like, oh, that's a plot hole. But
Mhm.
and it's really not. It's just that's what you kind of were allowed to do back then. And I always thought that would be so cool. And the writing on that show is really sophisticated, especially for a kids show. The kids did not win all the time on Are You Afraid of the Dark? Sometimes it was very much like the Twilight Zone. Because DJ McHale, the creator of Are You Afraid of the Dark, he will openly say he modeled his show after the Twilight Zone. Because they always said, in the Twilight Zone, submitted for your approval, and then they also say that in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I
But
think it was like that childhood sense of awe and wonder.
yes, totally. And every episode you had a new cast. All
Yes.
the other shows, which were great, you had your cast and you could fall in love with them, and that's
Hmm.
awesome. But this one, because it was an anthology and they were telling a different story, yeah, you had the Midnight Society at the beginning and end, but the middle, there was always a different, they were always having to find a different cast, different locations, different stories. So I had a lot hearing about that as an adult from DJ McHale. Was like, wow, the creator of the show. It gave me an even bigger respect for the work they did. But I think that show had a profound impact on me because the storytelling was so good. And to this very day, I love horror films. So it probably started there.
I like that show, but I don't like horror or being in the dark. No.
Right.
I just loved watching it. That's it.
That's a good point. I say that it would be cool to go out in the woods in the middle of the night, but maybe I would just rather watch it on TV, watch somebody else do it.
In your opinion, what made Nickelodeon so appealing to millions of children and we can say even adults?
Yeah. I mean, it was crazy revolutionary, and the creative people were allowed to be creative. One thing when you say, oh, 80s and 90s Nick, I love 80s and 90s Nick. You hear people say that all the time, but what does that mean? Because every single show was so different.
Mm-hmm.
Are You Afraid of the Dark and all that there's nothing the same about those two
It's
shows.
not the same, no.
And then you look at like Double Dare or Salute Your Shorts or Rugrats. Every single show is totally different. So, I think nowadays, not just Nickelodeon, but media in general, there's a lot of pressure to, when someone finds a formula that works, just keep using that formula, tweak it just a little bit, but keep making the same show over and over again, just slightly different. And they didn't do that. So I think that made people really into it. You didn't just want to watch, I was never like, I just want to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? I wanted to watch Nickelodeon, and I didn't really care what was on. I just wanted to watch it. And that's what they did. They created it wasn't just about the shows. It was about the whole network, the bumpers, all the little commercials, all the little shorts that they play in between shows. It all became part of something bigger. And so I think that the fact that Geraldine Laybourne hired creative people and let them be creative. And also I think that she was a teacher. Geraldine Laybourne was a teacher.
Yes.
And so she knew how to understand kids in an authentic way and talk to them in a way that didn't feel like they were being talked down to, because there's a meme going around for years now. And I'm sure you've seen it, where it's Steve Buscemi and he's got a skateboard over his shoulder and then like a backwards baseball cap. And he's like 50 years old and he's saying, "Hello, fellow kids," when he's obviously not a kid, And I feel like that's how kids feel. Like whenever an adult is trying to talk to them and it's not authentic, kids can see through that.
Mm-hmm.
Immediate, and that's how they view it, is that Steve Buscemi meme, someone trying to be cool, trying to talk to them. Like I always say
they don't respond well to.
They don't respond. If you're trying to make kids programming and you start off with the phrase, "Hey kids," you've messed up. That's not how kids want to be talked to. And that's how so many other people were doing it. But, she had focus groups. Geraldine Laybourne had focus groups where she would go into schools and just talk to them. Not even about shows, just get to know what kids in the 80s, what their life was like, what they were afraid of, what they aspired to be. And because of that, she was able to talk to them and make those shows authentic. Like I always thought when I was a kid that Nickelodeon was made by kids. It looked like a network that literally kids were behind the cameras and writing the shows. It always felt like that. It felt very authentic and it felt effortless. And so now with the documentary, we kind of pull back that curtain and show you that there was a lot of hard work that went into understanding kids, a lot of hard work and passion and heart that went into making it feel just effortless.
Awesome. Like you mentioned before, the documentary features tons of interviews from the writers, animators, creators, and actors from all, our favorite Nickelodeon shows like Kristen Taylor, Melissa Joan Hart, Kenan Thompson, Kel Mitchell, and Drake Bell, just to name a few. How it was like to work with them, to interview them?
Amazing. We never got over being starstruck by doing this. I mean, the whole time we were like, we are meeting our whole childhood here. But beyond that, we kept thinking eventually we would run into a diva. We kept thinking eventually we'd run into that jaded former child actor who's kind of a jerk or somebody who just, wanted to be, where's my hair and makeup? Where's my
Yeah.
water? And we never, ever ran into it. And with the amount of people that we interviewed in this doc, it's like over 30 people are in this documentary. The numbers say that surely at least you get one rotten egg in there.
Yeah.
And we kept waiting for it, and it never happened. Everybody was so nice. Yeah, I mean, you look at people like Kenan Thompson, Drake Bell, Christine Taylor, Melissa Joan Hart, and many others. They're like big stars. They have the right to kind of be a jerk if they wanted to, and they weren't. Like they were actually some of the nicest people. And everybody was willing to talk about their time at Nickelodeon. And I think that shows Geraldine Laybourne's leadership. The fact that it was they have as wonderful a memories as we do. The wonderful memories we have watching it, they have even more wonderful memories of getting to be a part of it. And I think
Because
that
they
shows,
lived it. Yeah.
they lived it. And I think it shows that she created this really beautiful, non-toxic, whatever the opposite of toxic is, beautiful, flourishing, wonderful environment for people to create shows and work on shows.
When you interviewed Kenan Thompson, was he as funny as we think he is, like with Saturday Night Live and stuff like that? Is he funny?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We were blown away because, I mean, you see him on Saturday Night Live and he's hilarious. But now it's like he doesn't have a script, right? And he doesn't have costumes and stuff like that. And he was hilarious. Like we weren't ready for it. Like he was, and he's got a couple of really funny stories in the documentary. Like it's good to see that it's like, okay, this guy, I mean, we already knew it, but it just kind of confirmed it. It's like, this guy doesn't need a script. He doesn't need the lights and the costumes to be funny. He's like every bit of fame that guy has, which is thankfully a lot, he deserves. Because one, he's a wonderful down-to-earth person. And two, he is a hilarious guy. And he was so low key in our interview. And it's like, he can even be funny like that, just his stories are so funny. He's just sitting there telling stories real chill. And even doing that, he's like a god of comedy.
How this project is different than any other past work you've done?
Well, for me, it's very different because I've never made a movie before. This is my first one. This is my first time to ever make a documentary. So it's very different than anything I've ever done. And I got to work with a lot of amazing people. That was something that was real cool. We always say, this was something that Adam and I wanted to do ourselves. We wanted to see this to completion, but we didn't do this ourselves. We got to be involved in every aspect of the filmmaking process, and that's what we wanted. But we did not do this by ourselves. We worked with so many amazing people on this. So that's another thing that is different than anything I've ever done is to get to work with such an amazing team that was big. We had Elisa Reyes, who is one of the original All That cast members.
Right.
And she's hilarious. And she became a producer on this documentary. And we got to work with her, not just interview her, but after her interview, we talked to her and she wanted to be more involved in the project. And we were absolutely thrilled to have her be part of the project. So to get to work with somebody like her was amazing. And we had some great producers, Bill Parks, Lee Leshin, Sean Cawthon, that we all met through this, and they all did amazing things. And then, the editors, I edited this project along with Sean Cawthon and a guy named Bradford Thomason, who's a wonderful editor. He edited the Glow documentary that's out there, the Rock-afire explosion. Do you remember Showbiz Pizza? Did you have that where you were?
Yes.
I always have to ask that because different parts of the country, some of them didn't have it. So I knew we were the same age, but some people are like, I don't know what that, if you lived in certain areas, like, I don't know. But yeah, he wrote and edited that. So we got to work with people we were a fan of. He was a documentary filmmaker we were a fan of. The guy that did the music for it, his name is Darren Beck. He's a fantastic musician. He's got a band called Pinkish Black. They're amazing. He did all the music for it. And then we had a great animator named Jeff Johnson. He did all those little we have a couple of animated segments in there that I'm really proud of. He did that, and he did a wonderful job. And then Allie Clark, she's a fantastic animator as well. She animated our opening credits. I think our opening credits are I'm really proud of the way that came about. I think it gives the film a life of its own, because we're not just trying to have Nickelodeon style. We wanted to have our own
Exactly.
style. And I think that she did that. She single-handedly helped us establish our own style, because we wanted people to know this documentary isn't made by Nickelodeon. It's made by people that just love Nickelodeon. And then, we had a lot of great people that worked on this. Justin Harder, who did the end credits for Deadpool, he did a lot of he did like our poster and a lot of our poster artwork. So that was one thing that was different for me, is I never worked on a project with that many people. And the fact that we got to work with that many people that were awesome and cool and talented was like very humbling and overwhelming.
Awesome. What would you like the viewers to take away after watching the Orange Years, the Nickelodeon story?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of said it before, but I would love people to go, wow, I knew I loved it, but I didn't know it was that groundbreaking. I didn't know they were the first to do that. I didn't know that without Nickelodeon doing this thing, I probably wouldn't have all these cool things I have today. I would love for people to know that. And I would also love for people to go, wow, I thought they were just these zany Pete and Pete, Salute Your Shorts, Ren and Stimpy. I thought they were just these wacky shows, but there was actually a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes by Geraldine Laybourne and Vanessa Coffey and their whole team. A lot of them were women, and I think a lot of people need to know that, and just to know the work that they did to make something special. You know, it's kind of like when you're a little kid and you get all these Christmas presents, and you think it's Santa or whatever, and then when you grow up and you realize that was your mom and dad doing all
Exactly.
that. And they did a lot of work, you know, they had to wait for you to be asleep, and they had to wrap all that stuff. And if
Yeah.
I'm a dad now, so I'm living that side of it. If there's a bike or there's a dollhouse, they had to put all that stuff together and then arrange it. As a kid, you take it for granted. You're just like, it just happens, you know. But then as you grow up, you're like, wow, my mom and dad did a bunch of cool stuff for me that I never thought of. That's kind of the same feeling with this. Like, you had this amazing thing that was cool. Now we're going to show you all the crazy, out of the box, hard work that these people did to give you these special, amazing memories.
Are you working on anything new right now that you can talk about?
So the whole team is working on a bunch of great stuff, and it's really great. It's almost like your friends all going away to college and doing amazing things on their own. You know, we're doing things together and separate. You know, our Sean Coffin, who was our director of photography, he made a documentary called Netflix versus the World after this. That's out there. That's kind of about Netflix and Blockbuster, how, you know, Blockbuster kind of went away and Netflix took that torch. It's a really fun, beautiful documentary. And our producer, Lee Leshin, he's got a film out called Waldo on Weed that's all about, you know, CBD oil and
Awesome.
yeah, like, and especially before it kind of became more of I guess mainstream or whatever, like,
Yeah.
it's all about a father's journey of I would do anything for my son. Because he has a son who has a rare form of eye cancer.
Okay.
And yeah, it's a real cool documentary. Everybody's Elisa Reyes, who is our producer. She's got a movie called Break Even coming out. That's like an action film. It looks like Speed. And that's really cool. And Adam and I have some projects that we're working on. I've got a documentary that I'm editing right now. So we've got a bunch of really cool projects that are all coming out pretty soon.
The one that you're editing right now, is it Gwar?
Are you saying that because of my shirt or because you looked it up?
I looked it up and now I saw your shirt.
I do that as a subtle hint, but yes, I'm editing a documentary about the band Gwar, and I'm so excited to get that out there because it's in a way you're like, whoa, that's kind of weird, Nickelodeon to Gwar, but there's I like telling stories of triumph. I love telling stories of underdogs, people that did things their own way. And I love taking a closer look at things. You know, you look at Gwar and you're like, that's this crazy rock band that wears these costumes. But it's like, no, you know, they're essentially putting on a little mini play, a little mini rock opera in different cities every night. They're the absolute hardest working rock band out there. And actually, they don't even consider themselves a band. They consider themselves more like a traveling circus or an art collective.
Okay.
and they're just amazing. And so I'm really excited to get that story out there because I think people will really whether, and I always say, whether you like heavy metal music or rock music, that's beside the point. I wasn't into the world of exotic big cats, but I certainly watched all of Tiger King.
Tiger King.
And I knew nothing about big cats or lions or tigers.
Same
And
here.
this documentary isn't like that. It's not exploitive like that one was. I think Guar is a lot more positive, but it's the same thing. At the end of the day, any of these guys could have gone on, could have changed and been a pop guitar player, played like Limp Bizkit or Creed, that kind of music, and made $1 million. Or they could have gone and done movies and special effects for movies. All these people are so talented. And if they had wanted to make just money, they could have done it at any point. But they stayed true to their dream all these years. And I think that's really admirable and beautiful.
Awesome. And one word, how would you describe Nickelodeon?
Insane.
Insane. Well, Scott, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Hype Club podcast. Please remind us where we can find you on all social media and when and where the Orange Years, the Nickelodeon story will be available.
So, yeah, the Orange Years, it's out November 17th on iTunes and Amazon. If you want a physical copy, you can get it at Amazon.com. You can get a DVD or Blu-ray there, or you can get a DVD at Target.com. So if you want a physical copy, that's where you go, or else if you just want it digitally, iTunes and Amazon, come November 17th. You can find us on all sorts of all the social media platforms. Instagram is probably the best place, but it just at the Orange Years, that's where we are. And we're doing a lot of real cool stuff even after the movie comes out. We're going to be doing giveaways and prizes and all sorts of we just gave away a Good Burger hat and apron signed by Keenan Mitchell and Keenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell. And then I almost want to call it Kel Kimball from his character on the Keenan and Kel. But yeah, we have a hat and an apron giveaway. And now we're giving away a poster and a DVD. We've got a lot of cool stuff that's going to be giveaways for people. All you have to do is show that you got the movie, and then you get some pretty cool stuff. So yeah, there's going to be some exciting things going on our Instagram. So please check it out.
And I think on Instagram, it's at the Orange Years, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, Scott, thank you again for being on the Hype Club podcast. And to our listeners, tune in next week for the latest world and entertainment news. Until then, have a great week. Ciao!